why do people intentionally do this? And now I understand, a year in, I'm like, this is fun and he's learning and everything. But I think people over glorify having a kid in the early, like you might be, I would tell my friends, I'm like, you might be really fucking miserable for the first 6 to 9 months. Like it's just the way that it is. And then it gets fun. But
welcome to Startup Dad, the podcast where we dive into the lives of dads who are also leaders in the world of startups and business. I'm your host, Adam Fishman, and in this episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Alex Cohen. Alex is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and the senior director of product at Carbon Health. Maybe most importantly, though, he is one of the most prolific shit posters on Twitter, and now has started his own podcast with some other fellow shit posters called The Outsiders. Alex and I covered a lot of ground in this episode. We talk about how he got fired from Home Depot, marrying his high school sweetheart and prom date, being one of the youngest parents in his neighborhood, his wife's take on him as an internet celebrity, and how his shitposting has enabled her to choose to not work outside the home. We also talk about how parenting is really, really hard without a community, family, or a network of friends to commiserate with, and what it was like to bring home a newborn during the peak of the pandemic. My conversation with Alex was funny and heartwarming, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. My guest today on the program is a serial founder, angel investor, and is currently two things. One, the most incredibly prolific shit poster on Twitter and seems to be spilling into LinkedIn. And also the senior director of product at Carbon Health. Please welcome Alex Cohen to the show. Alex, it's good to have you on Startup Dad. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for that introduction.
I'm sure I didn't do your whole background a ton of justice. So tell me a little bit more about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing today, both being prolific on Twitter and also leading a big chunk of product at Carbon Health.
Yeah, it's been an interesting, I guess, untraditional path to running a product team at a really large tech company and also Twitter. Like I never thought that it would blow up. I actually had to change my profile pic a couple of days ago because I keep getting stopped in person and I'm like, this is kind of weird. I'm not sure I want more people recognizing me in real life, but like literally once a week I have someone come up and they go, hey, I follow you on Twitter. Or like I literally was at the park in the neighborhood here in Austin over the weekend and it's just me and one other dad. And the guy looks at me and he's like, hey, you're the neighborhood Twitter guy. And I was like, what the fuck? Like how... Like, how do people... Anyway, so I changed my profile pic temporarily to see if that sort of tones down the in real life interactions. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the product stuff, just out of school, I was building a company kind of by accident. And instead of sunsetting it like most other college seniors do and moving on to the real life, I decided to keep building it with no salary out of school. And one thing turned to another, started learning about fundraising and meeting investors, and that went pretty unsuccessfully. But we eventually, 4.5 years later, got acqui-hired, and that was kind of my first venture into a larger company, and then worked for that fintech company for about a year before I burnt out due to how toxic they were. And then I started working on a second company. Again, like that one was actually by accident as well. I wanted to like bootstrap some SaaS tools and people got really excited about the first one that we started building and it became a real thing. We ended up raising money for that one. I moved out to San Francisco, like back from New York to SF. I had made like the Florida SF New York journey and then New York to SF where my new co-founder was. And then we had a co-founder falling out at the end of 2020. Which is when one of our angel investors was leading product at Carbon Health and recruiting me to join. And so I ended up joining as director of product initially on a certain team at Carbon, which has grown to be a much larger team because now I run all of our consumer product and our growth team. So been there for a year and a half and it is the furthest thing from a toxic company, which is great. And I'm still very much enjoying it. Like 19 months in or whatever it is. So that's kind of the path there. And then in terms of Twitter, it just was like a natural evolution of trolling people on the internet, I think. And it just happened that, yes, I sort of found a weird niche to lean into. It's just satire, sarcasm, because that's also I think, from our time together, like that's basically me in real life as well. And so that's me on Twitter. And I think people enjoy the authenticity and it's just grown a lot over a couple of years.
Yeah, that's how I actually first met you. Well, maybe you didn't meet me, but I discovered you on Twitter and then reached out to have dinner when we were at a conference together. And that was really fun. So I'm kind of glad that I did that because now here you are. And we're talking
Yeah.
about parenting at some point. And then when did you get into angel investing? I was looking back at your profile and you made quite a few investments. It looks like you and a partner kind of run that together. I had no idea how kind of involved you were in check writing into companies, but it looks like quite a few investments you've made.
Over 70 now. So it's been really active. So granted, it's not all my money. So I did not have a lot of money for a long time running the first company. And then after we got acquired, I got a full salary and I got bonuses and all that stuff, which was great. And I had a pretty big network at that time of founders who I wish I could have invested in back when I was working on my own thing, although I didn't have any money. So there was nothing to invest. And I started doing a few small angel checks. So that was when I invested into like Italic, for example, and then into Sky Craig's company, who was doing some interesting first-time homebuyer stuff. And I knew that I wanted to do more like larger checks, higher velocity, but I still couldn't do it off my own personal savings account. And so I always had the idea of doing an angel fund. And then that ended up materializing where we raised just shy of $3 million for the first fund. Bart was an angel investor in my last company and he had sold his company. So we had like pooled our funds together, raised from a bunch of other operators. And now we sort of had this pool of cash to go deploy at a lot higher velocity and also larger check sizes. And then that fund did 47 investments. And then our LPs were like, do you want more money? Like, this is great. And so we said, yes. Yeah. And that was December of this past year. So like December, January. So 6 months ago, we raised the second fund and like $6.5 million came in overnight. And we've made 19 investments this year so far out of it. So
wow.
Yeah. So it's been really active. Yeah. And we wrote larger checks into this fund. Like we had personal checks into the first fund. We have personal checks into this fund. So we've got a lot of skin in the game. And we just meet so many early stage interesting founders that it's such an interesting product to sell to our LPs who don't have access to that same asset class at that level of risk. And so it's still not like I'm part-time. It's not a full-time venture thing.
Sure.
But I think if you look at the investments we've made, it's been pretty exciting to see what it's done as a part-time gig.
Yeah. It's also probably a good learning opportunity for you too, to like get closer to a bunch of different companies and see what they're like from the inside and get those like, updates and things like that. So it gives you a lot of exposure to interesting things. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for telling me a bit about your professional background. Tell me a little bit about you personally. So it sounds like, if I recall, you grew up in Florida. Is that right?
Yeah.
What was life like growing up in Florida? How have you felt about sort of Florida to New York to California to now Austin, like decision to leave California? And where'd you meet your partner too?
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear about all that.
We met in high school, actually. So we're high school sweethearts, went to prom together. We've been together now for like 11 or 12 years. I forget how many. Grew up in South Florida. There wasn't that much exciting going on, kind of a standard, regular place to grow up and live, and ended up going to school at the University of Florida, dual degreed in finance and information systems, and just sort of like had always been tinkering with software since I can remember. Like I was probably 10 years old, figuring out how to like dual boot Linux on a computer and run scripts to hack my neighbor's Wi-Fi passwords. Like that was basically my childhood, and then a bunch of video games. And at one point I worked at Office Depot doing tech support. So like I was literally like, if you came into an Office Depot, I was the person who was like, yeah, we can like rip apart your computer and figure out what's going on. Like why you're like basically Geek Squad, but for Office Depot, which is a lot less exciting. And then
you don't get the fancy cars to drive around to people's houses, right?
No, but that's actually why I got fired. So I got fired from Office Depot because I would have all these old people come in who like didn't know how to do bait. Like, can you set up my wireless printer? Like, this is like a 30-second thing. And Office Depot wanted $180 to do it. And I was like, I can't rip off these old people. So I'd be like, here's my number. Give me a call. I'll go to your house and do it for like $30. And so I had this like very large revolving pool of old people who would give me a call and say, hey, can you come install and like mount my TV and hook up my Roku and like connect my wireless printer and speed it. And so I would get paid like thousands of dollars as a teenager to go to these people's houses, install malware bytes and like speed up their computers and spend a couple hours there. And then
you're using Office Depot as your like pipeline. It's like siphoning off people.
Which was explicitly against the terms of my employment contract with them.
I'm certain.
So here's how genius I am and why I got fired. I made flyers to give out, and I printed them at Office Depot for free using the Office Depot print center. And one of the employees saw it and was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then I got fired.
That's like Al Capone getting busted for tax evasion, right? That's what that is. It's like you using the free printer for your side business, which involves stealing customers.
Well, the funny thing is it wasn't a free printer. And so when they found out how much I printed, not only did they fire me, but they made me pay for all the printing that I had done, which was like $90 worth of printing. And I remember just like holding my head in shame, being like, yeah, I kind of deserved this one. But also like, you motherfuckers made me clean the bathroom, which was not in my job description. Like you can't hire a professional cleaning service. And anyway, so I had a lot of animosity towards that company. But yeah, they were my like top of funnel lead gen for my own personal at home. I think I called it like iTech on demand or something. Anyway, I've got a whole bunch of startup ideas around in-house tech services. But then I worked for Apple for a bit doing like at home Genius support while I was in college. And then Sarah, my wife, and I went to the same university. And then once I started that company, senior year of school, we raised a little bit of money, moved to the Bay Area to try to raise more money. It was a very lonely, but like grueling part of my life. And then once we sold the company, we actually had a really big offer from Capital One. I'm out of my NDA with them. So like this was years ago, but Capital One made us an offer. It was like 7 figures, all cash. We owned like 80% of the company, and they rug pulled us at the last minute. And they were like, decided to move different directions. Like after we had signed an LOI, and then kept working on and ended up getting acquired by Even Financial, which was the company that I moved to New York for. They were recently acquired by MoneyLion. So now I have wonderful MoneyLion stock, and then moved back to the Bay Area and now to Austin. Just first time I think we've made a move that hasn't been 100% work related, which has been really nice.
Yeah. So tell me about your decision to leave California and move to Austin. You're not alone in that decision. We actually just had a set of friends who did the same thing, but I assume that it was like fairly motivated by, your young family and sort of your desire to have more space and just maybe not deal with California anymore.
Yeah, it was a bunch of things. I mean, I think like we'd only moved back to the Bay Area because I was working close to my old co-founder, and, mid COVID, there was like nothing going on. And so I was always like not really having a fun time out in the Bay Area, but also I was working so much. I was like, this is what I'm here for. Like I'm working and it doesn't matter, even though you're paying a shit ton of rent and everything's more expensive. After that co-founder breakup, we moved further south where my wife's work was. And like, we had also got pregnant, and it was kind of just like, then at that point I'm working for Carbon and I'm not going into the office at all. She's commuting to school and we have a baby. And our whole family is like 3,000 miles away in Florida. So it's hard for them to fly out and help. And I was just like, every day I'd wake up and be like, why are we spending the most expensive amount on rent each month to live in the most boring city in the country with no family support and paying crazy income tax? And I was like, this is just not where I want to live. And you can only do nature so much. Like you can only go hiking so much and be like, I love spending all this money to go hiking every weekend. And I guess the other big driver was like, we just didn't make any friends down there. Like no one was in their late 20s with a baby. It's either like, basically, if you are in your late 20s with a baby, it's like being on 16 and pregnant for the Bay Area. And if you, and because everyone really is like very close to their 40s by the time they have a kid, because work becomes priority for so long. And so we would like go try to meet other young parents, and I don't know, everyone would be like a generation older than me, and it just didn't feel like we'd be able to make any friends. Like my wife was going to the park every day. It was only nannies, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's like a cardinal sin in the Bay Area as well. And so it was just all those things like were piling up, and then our nanny quit, and we were like, okay, we just need to get the fuck out of here. And so that's what we did. So we found 3 guys to take over our apartment in Mountain View. They were like working on a Web3 project and turned it into a hacker house. And then we packed up the car, packed up the townhome and put it in the garage, and then just drove to Austin. In terms of deciding on Austin, we were in between 3 cities. So we ruled out anywhere that had a harsh winter, which like ruled out New York again and Hoboken, which I would have loved to go back to Hoboken, but we didn't. We wanted space and we didn't want winter, and that ruled out a bunch of places. I wanted a big enough tech community where I wouldn't feel isolated and like just trapped career wise. And then wanted to be somewhere like, affordable-ish. So we looked at Miami, Austin, and LA, Orange County area was kind of like the fallback if neither of those worked. And visited Miami, and we were just like, we grew up here. It's really not for us. We don't want to move back. It's just South Florida. Like I don't know. And even though that would have been the closest to family, which is nice, like would have been super helpful, visited Austin, and we were like, this actually feels like super homey after growing up in Florida. This has like a big enough city plus kind of the Florida-esque suburb feel that it's good. And had all the bars, restaurants, coffee shops, music, like all the stuff that we liked, minus professional sports. There's none of that here. You have to go to like Dallas or Houston, but it had like almost everything we were looking for, although it's gotten way more expensive than it was 3 years ago. But anyway, so that's how we didn't even look at LA after that. We just said, let's go to Austin, and best decision I think we made in the last 5 years.
I would ask you how you deal with the heat in the summer, but you're from the south of Florida. So like, it's probably like no big deal, I
mean, it's hot. Like, so here's what I would say is like the mornings are awesome. Like 7 a.m. to 11 or noon, you could be outside, you're sweating, but it's like anything below 95-ish is totally bearable to be outside. Noon to 7 is like fucking death. Like you don't want to be outside unless you're in the shade.
It's the surface of the sun. You're on the surface of the sun.
Literally. But because it's dry, if you go in the pool or if you go in the shade, it's actually really manageable to be outside. And then at night, it's great too. Like you can go play tennis and stuff, and it's just a dry 80 to 85 degree heat. And it's really like only this for 2.5 months. It's like not that bad. And so you sort of adapt around it. The hardest thing probably is the dogs don't get a lot of exercise midday. You have to do mornings and evenings, but there's just so much to do. And like everyone's near a pool, so you just go swimming. And then the rest of the year is perfect. Like winter is great. Fall and spring are like magical. They're dry. 75, 80 degrees. Like it really is the perfect temperature, and everyone's just suffering together, and you bond over trauma. So
you've now sold me on Austin. I'm buying a house there tomorrow. Actually, it doesn't sound like I could afford it anymore. So I wanted to ask you, so is your wife able to then be a stay-at-home mom? That was one of the goals, I imagine. She's great, very fortunate that she can do that.
Yeah, she loves hanging with the baby all day. She has friends who are stay-at-home moms. It's been great. I have tasked her with a new job, which is to find more brand sponsorships for my Twitter account. I told her, I was like, email all of your favorite brands and be like pitch, like give them the rate card for my Twitter account, and like, let's go turn my Twitter account into some side money.
Nice. I hope you pay a healthy commission on anyone that she lands for the Twitter account. So.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. Well, so that's actually an amazing segue to my next question, which is, what does your wife think about you being an internet sensation? How's that work in your relationship? Clearly, you've enrolled her in the process now. So
yeah, she finds it really funny. I think, her family now uses the word shitposter in sentences, which is funny. Like, I don't know. It's never really like she's supportive of it. It's funny because I don't tell a lot of people this, but like I get paid by a couple brands to actually like create memes and tweets for them for their accounts, and like it pays more than most average annual household incomes make, just like literally spending a few hours a week crafting memes and stuff. And so it's like, and that's actually like part of it is like shitposting replaced her salary, which is great. So it enabled her to go full time at home. And she finds it funny. I think like we have a similar sense of humor. So I'm like, you should try to shitpost for me and then like take over the Twitter account, but we'll see if that happens.
She's going to become your ghostwriter. I'll see if I can tell which ones. It's like the people who are like, which is the tweet that I wrote and which one's the one that the robot wrote. This is going to be you and your wife. We'll have a bake-off.
Yeah. She thinks it's funny. She hasn't been with me when I've gotten stopped in person yet. So that's something that she hasn't seen.
That's funny. That's interesting too. I do like your new profile pic, by the way. I think that's the Dolly one with the
Yeah.
sunset.
Yeah.
It's it's amazing. It's really nice. Quite the likeness is quite accurate. So I've got a pretty good lay of the land of you and your background and your wife. And I guess your wife would have to be very supportive of what you do because otherwise it'd probably drive her crazy that you're like doom scrolling through Twitter all the time to like read your mentions, which is a big problem that I have. Not that I get any mentions, but you know. So tell me about what it was like deciding to start a family with your wife. Because like you mentioned, you were quite a bit on the younger end of the spectrum when it comes to the Bay Area. And I can relate.
Yeah.
Because we had our first kid when I was 29. My wife and I were maybe both 29, I think, or she had just turned 30. There aren't that many people here that are, like you mentioned, in their 20s having kids or starting families. So how did you approach that topic with your wife? How did that decision come around?
Well, I guess sort of the first thing was like, it wasn't unplanned, but it wasn't planned. So it wasn't like we weren't trying, but we weren't not trying. So we like, removed all goalies and, took shots on goal and like it happened. But I think like my original plan was like, when I hit 30, like that's a good age because I'm out of my 20s and all that stuff. And it just happened a couple of years earlier, but we always knew we wanted a kid. It was still a bit of a, like, I don't know, it didn't feel real even 6 months into having the kid still. Like it does feel real now, but like I didn't feel like a dad for the first, during pregnancy and the first 6 months. And yeah, I mean, it was just more like we always knew we wanted kids, plural. And it just happened a little earlier than we had expected. And like, that was fine. So
Cool. And you have a son, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your earliest memory? So your son's just turned 1 pretty recently. So all of your memories are pretty early, I would imagine. But what's like your earliest memory of becoming a dad? What's your earliest fatherhood memory?
Oh, I was in the OR when they did the C-section. So like, I very vividly remember them handing me the baby and like, this is yours. And I was like, what is this thing? So I remember that for sure. After that, everything was kind of a blur until like, we got home and it was just a lot of sleepless nights and screaming. I remember just like, he was kind of colicky. So we dealt with that for 3.5 months, which is a very long time to hear a screaming baby for 8 hours a day. But like, yeah, I remember we would just go on a ton of walks. And I remember like day 3, I was like, it's time to start using the $900 stroller that we bought. And so we just started going on a bunch of walks. And I remember like I started to just like, I was like, I want to, be more active and just like, I need to get out of the house. Like, this kid's screaming all day. And this was also part of the reason we were miserable in Mountain View, was like no family to just pop on by and support and sort of take, like, just give you a breather. So Sarah's mom came out for like a month and like that was great. But then you have someone living with you in a small townhome for a month. So it was just, it's just hard. Like I think sorry, I know this is like a tangent from the initial question, but it's just, it's rough in this country where we like, you grow up somewhere and you have to move away for your career is kind of just like the default thing. And it's hard because like you start a family, you just don't have a support network around you. And I think that's been one of the nice things about remote work is like it's given people that opportunity to move closer to families, get childcare. Like we don't even offer free childcare in the country. So like you need help. But yeah, anyway, so that was my earliest memories, is like just all the screaming and just I remember being really, really miserable. And I've been like pretty open about this, but I was not happy. I was like very depressed for the first 4 months after having a kid. My shitposting got really good during that time. It was like an outlet for me, but it was a dark time.
That's really interesting because I think, a lot of people don't talk about that stuff. Everything's always like Instagram ready photos. Look at the baby, like look at how amazing our life is. We're so happy. Meanwhile, that's like 5 minutes of your day. And the rest of the day is like dragging, depressed. It's hard. Like being a parent is hard. Kids are not easy. They don't sleep. They are colicky. And it's like the norm. That's not the exception to the rule. Like that's the norm. And I think you made a really interesting point about not having family and then also being one of the youngest people there. So you don't have anyone else to like commiserate with, right? And you kind of need that network of people to be like, hey, doesn't having a baby suck? And you're like, yeah, having a baby sucks. So you're like, yay, we're friends now. So you just don't have it anymore,
No, you don't. And I mean, They were definitely Instagram worthy photos that we took. And again, it's like a blip of your day. It's not like the rest of the day is just listening to screaming, being extremely tired. It's, man, I mean, I think I remember asking myself, like, what is the point of having a kid? Like, why do people intentionally do this? And now I understand, a year in, I'm like, this is fun and he's learning and everything. But I think people over glorify having a kid in the early, like, you might I would tell my friends, I'm like, you might be really fucking miserable for the first 6 to 9 months. Like, it's just the way that it is. And then it gets fun. But yeah, I mean, and we didn't have like friends to commiserate with who also had kids because we didn't know anyone who was our age with kids. I had like one friend who had a baby a couple weeks before us. And when I would complain, I'd be like, how's it going with you? He's like, oh, she's an angel. She's sleeping. She's not crying.
Right.
She blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fuck you. Like, this is not a helpful conversation for me. But he would listen, like he would let me vent and he'd be like, it'll get better, blah, blah, blah. But still, it's like, I didn't get to commiserate with anyone who was going through, similar experience.
Yeah. What are some of the most surprising things that you discovered as a new dad, like in the last year, aside from the fact that it's really friggin' hard? What are some like things where you had no idea this was going to happen?
Well, I still don't really like interacting with other babies. Like I'm cool with interacting with my own kid. I'm still like, I don't know what to say to your kid. Like it's not my kid. Like I don't, want to make faces at it and stuff. And so that's definitely interesting. I didn't realize like how exciting it would be to watch a tiny human learn really, really basic skills. So now again, if you say clap, he starts clapping. If you say put your hands up, he goes like this. And so it's like, you start seeing them learn and progress and it becomes really exciting. Yeah. I mean, I also didn't realize how much shit babies have. Like when you travel, you have so much stuff you're bringing with you. It's like, I just bought one carry-on suitcase and now we have like a check-in bag and a play pack and a fucking tent and a stroller. And I'm like, none of this stuff is for me. And you are 15 pounds. Like what is going on here? That's definitely something. And then I also I think I was really lazy and unproductive before having a kid. Like I had so much free time and I just like slept in till like 11 every day. And like, I guess I don't really know what I did in all these hours that we spend helping the kid and working now. So
yeah. That's one of the things that I've realized about being a parent is it makes you so precious about your time. Like every minute you're doing something valuable. Right. So I have friends who are like, how come you don't play more video games? And I'm like, well, I always feel like I should be doing something else when I'm doing that. So the world of product management is all about frameworks, right? Which is like, we got a framework for everything. Do you have any frameworks for parenting? You must have developed something over the last year of your kid's life.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have some like general principles that I abide by, which is like, I give zero fucks what anyone else thinks of my parenting. So like my wife will be out and like the baby will fall. And then I'll be like, okay, so like let him fall and he'll get up. And then, she'll be like, but there's other parents around. Like, I'm like, who cares? Let them come say something. Like I'll argue that. So definitely like, I think most people like after working with enough people, you generally realize that like, most people don't know what they're doing or like you don't really care about their opinion. And so it's like, why do I like they're probably not that good at parenting. Why would I care what they think anyway? And so anyway, so that's like one general principle. The other is, I don't know, I don't really structure my life around my life is not very structured, but like I just kind of like go with the flow in terms of what just everything with him. It's like, oh, if he wants to try this food, like he should try this food. Like, if he's up at 8 and he doesn't look tired, like he's staying up till 9. It's just like, there is like, I just don't have that like, I've never really been, I think most founders are like neurotic and chaos and it translates into my personal life. And there's not a ton of, never really had great routines and plans and all that. And so you just kind of like, every day is a little bit different in that regard.
Yeah, you sound like a much more relaxed parent than many that I've talked to who are like, oh my God, including myself. I'm like, oh my God, it's 8:01. The kids need to be in bed. What am I doing? I would say that I threw that out the window this summer because it just became impossible and the pandemic didn't help. Speaking of that, what was it like having a pandemic kid? Like your kid was born during like the peak of the pandemic, right? In 2021. So
yeah, July. I think we were a little bit sheltered from, like, I think he's a little bit sheltered from the effects of the pandemic because during the first year, they don't really do much anyway. So it's like not that, like, we still took him everywhere. Like, I don't know. I guess I definitely have a much higher tolerance of risk and just general, like, I'm not neurotic and freak out over things. And so we took him everywhere. Like for the first year, there would be times where we would be like, I forget, like at a bar at like 10 p.m. and he'd be sleeping in the stroller and he'd be like, maybe this is too much. but like, so we took him everywhere. And, I think now that we're in Texas, it's very much we're open type of state. Mm-hmm. Like, who cares about a pandemic? It's sort of like life is normal here. And I don't think he's been that affected by it. I think the biggest thing was just like, for us, it limited the things that we could do during that initial time. Like the gyms were still closed or there were mask mandates. And like, I don't know. It's just, that was California generally. It was, very strict rules. And it was more limiting to like what we could do to get out of the house and escape versus I think how it'll affect him.
Yeah. I was going to say probably more challenging for you and your wife than for him. You're like, I'm clawing at the walls here. I need to get out. And he's like, I don't care. I'm a baby. I look like Winston Churchill, like I'm a blob. So I asked you about how your wife thinks about you being an internet sensation. I want to know what you think your kid is going to do or say when he grows up and learns that his dad is a famous internet shit poster. So like, what do you think? Do you think he's going to be embarrassed? Do you think he's going to be proud? Like, are you going to not be able to go out in public because you get recognized and he'll be, certainly about that.
I guess as long as I don't cancel myself really drastically, like it only gets more intense from here. And so, I assume I'll be at like 100K by the end of the year, and 100K on Twitter is like 2 million on Instagram. Like I really think it's a lot harder to build an audience on Twitter than an actual engaged audience than Instagram. But I don't know. I think it'll be like, it might be a little weird when he gets to the age and like his friends are on the internet and they're like, I follow your dad, or like, or the friend's parents. Like, it's always been a little bit weird making friends when like they only know you from the internet. And so it's like, are they friends with me? Cause like I like people, I think like it's kind of like never meeting your heroes. And I don't know. I guess people like look up to my Twitter persona, which again is me in real life. Like I don't really I'm not like a fake person on Twitter, but it might make it a little bit awkward for like, for like parent teacher conferences and things like that. But we'll see. I really don't know. Maybe it's a different type of, internet famous than like being a celebrity where you have paparazzi in your face and things like that. So it definitely is like, it's not like that. It's way chill where people are just like, hey, Alex. And I'm like, hey, I don't know who you are, but like, this is fun. So we'll see. Hopefully he doesn't go full unhinged on the internet after I'm fully unhinged on the internet.
You're going to get that. Dad, my friend's parents say that they can't come over because you're a weird internet guy. They saw something.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Time will tell. Who knows if anyone even be on Twitter anymore by the time your kid's old enough to know what it is, right?
I'll just subtweet like his friend's parents and be like, oh, we'll get there in 8 years or whenever that is when we get there. I don't even know when kids get a phone these days. So
that's a very personal decision, let me tell you. We're getting there. We're getting close to it with my daughter, who's almost 10. So I want to talk about a partnership with your wife. It's super important, right, to agree on things with your spouse, but also it's very hard. So I'd love to hear about two things. One, what's something that you and your wife are like super lockstep in agreement on? And then what's an area where you're really at polar opposites of one another? Like what's something you don't agree on?
I'll start with the one we don't agree on because I think I know that I have a good answer for that one. But so she has her master's in education. She was a teacher. She's a great teacher. And so she wants to do a lot more homeschooling than I want to do. And so she like wants to do the at-home schooling, maybe with friends and stuff. And I'm like, I don't love that. Then he's not going to get like social interactions and things like, so we're trying to find the compromise of like, well, does he go to school? Does he do homeschooling for like 4 hours a day and then like just play sports and things like that? But school is a big defining part of my life. And so it's weird to think about just like not going to school and meeting friends and, you get bullied and stuff, but it's part of, I think, growing up. So that's probably one of the things that we'll have to figure out when the time comes when he's old enough to go to school. I think the thing that we're really in lockstep on is just like, we agree on most things parenting wise. So it's hard to say that like there's a specific, like minus the schooling part at some point, which I think will be like an interesting compromise whenever we get there. It's like, we agree on most things regarding we just need to do whatever we need to sometimes to get a break, or like, we just let him cry it out and he figured out how to sleep for 12 hours a night. So like in the beginning, she was very anti him sleeping in his own room really early on. And I was like, no, like I don't want to sleep next to him. It's like loud and I don't want to hear a sound machine. And eventually we made it there where he was in his own room. He started sleeping throughout the night, all that stuff. And then yeah, but I don't think there's like much parenting wise that we disagree on. So it's, we're like, she kind of though is like the boss, like she's the head parent for sure. And then I'm just kind of like hanging along.
So what she says goes. I get it.
Yeah.
Cool. Aside from sleep, what's something you had to give up as a father, or something that you don't do nearly as much as you used to be able to do?
Well, I gave up my Tesla. That was sad. I got a large Ford Expedition.
Okay.
But I mean, the thing that I really miss, and I actually made this comment the other night and we got into a little bit of an argument, like not an argument, but just like, more of just, she didn't love the comment, but I was like, I kind of miss when we could just like fuck off and go anywhere without worrying about a baby at home. And like, I do kind of miss that. Like, it's just, we can't go to the gym together. We can't go play pickleball together. Like, we need to find a babysitter or we're like, if he goes to sleep at 7:30, it doesn't just mean that we can go out and do stuff. It means like we're at home figuring out what to do now. And like, I miss sort of the flexibility of just like being able to only think about ourselves and not be dependent on someone else's schedule. And like, you get used to it. She doesn't. And she's like, I don't miss that at all. Like, I love taking care of it. I'm like, that's great. I still sometimes miss just being able to do whatever we wanted to without worrying. And so that's probably the biggest thing that we've given up is just, everyone gives it up, is like that flexibility to do whatever you want without like worrying about being responsible for a tiny human.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also something that you get more comfortable with over time, and just like finding ways to work through that. My wife and I go out a lot more than we used to when our kids were younger, because we're like, babysitter, you're a high school kid, you're probably great with the kids, let's do this.
Well, that's how I am. That's how I am right now. He's like, no, we need to like really know the person who's babysitting and stuff. So we actually just hired a babysitter for the first time. We had an amazing nanny in California. Like, she was awesome, education background from Columbia. Like, she literally she cooked, she cleaned, she did our lawn. Like, she was awesome. Like, and then she quit, which was really sad. She took a full-time job at Target. And now that we're here and my wife's a stay-at-home mom, we just had a babysitter for the first time ever. And it was one of our neighbors who we had hired to be a dog walker. We were like, she's really nice and reliable. Like, should we just ask her to hang out for a few hours after the baby goes to sleep? And that's one of those things where like Sarah is still getting comfortable letting someone else be responsible for the baby. And I'm like, I think these people are trained and qualified. Like, it'll be fine. And so definitely an area where we,
Yeah. All right. Ready. Here we go. Okay. Rapid fire. Most indispensable parenting product you've ever purchased.
We bought this 10 for like $150 that goes over a play pack. So when you're traveling, they get a pitch black sleep, and it is the best $150 I've ever spent.
Love that. I want that for myself. Most useless parenting product you've ever purchased. Try to pick just one.
Yeah, just one. We purchased like a ride along trike thing that he just hated sitting in. Like, honestly, like the dumbest shit is what kids play with. Like, he'll play with a sock for hours, but he doesn't want to play with any of his toys. So
sock. I love it. It's so true. But that sock's probably amazing. What is the most frustrating thing that has ever happened to you as a dad?
Most of the frustration is just like those first few months for me when he was just crying nonstop. You couldn't console him. And it was just like, yeah, it's just one of those things where like everything's out of your control and you feel like everything's falling apart. Like, that's definitely the most frustrating. I don't know if it's like one specific moment as much as it is just like that experience.
Okay. What's your go-to dad wardrobe? Your dad core outfit?
I'm really big into like a pair of rainbow flip-flops, some gym shorts, and a Target t-shirt. And like, that's literally my life right now.
Awesome. Did you ever drop your kid as a baby?
No.
You still have an opportunity to. Don't worry.
Well, now that he's like walking, he's definitely like fallen and he hit his head today. But like, I don't think I never physically let go of him and like he fell. So that's a win for me.
No trips to the ER yet though.
Not for that, but like no, he's never been to he went to the ER once for like, we thought he might have had COVID, but he didn't. And then, but nothing for like, no injuries. No
okay, good. There's a long time. You got a long time for an ER trip. So it's inevitable.
Good insurance. Though.
Good. How many parenting books do you have in your house or in your storage unit?
One, maybe, I think.
Oh,
total. Like
how many parenting books have you read cover to cover?
Half of one. So, like I just like don't. It's oh man, like I just don't believe in a lot of this like fucking advice from random strangers who pretend like they're like, because then you meet them in real life, right? Like I've met all of these people in real life, and I'm like, they're just not that impressive as they are when they spend years and years writing a book. And I'm like, this thing is just like the one book we have is just like what to do in an emergent, like here's the tree, like follow it, like follow this decision-making tree, depending on what your kid has. I don't want to read a book on like, you need to put them down at 8 p.m. and like this at 8:30. I'm just like, there's no prescriptive way to life. And I just like can't read these books.
Yeah.
I can't. So.
Okay. What is the age that you are most looking forward to for your son?
I think like 3 to 5 when he starts playing sports, and I can just like be the fucking crazy dad, bring in all the, like going to all the sports events and getting really competitive. And like, I hope that'll be me.
Follow up. Are you going to be the coach of one of his teams?
If it's tennis, I can be. If it's baseball, like I'm a little rusty, but we'll see. It depends on the sport. Okay. Soccer, like no way.
Definitely. You are definitely from Florida. You said tennis and baseball. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah. Screen time. Good, bad, indifferent. How do we feel about screen time?
Like for the kid?
I mean, open-ended.
I believe like, so he doesn't watch that. He won't sit in front of a TV for a long period of time. But like, if it gets me a half an hour reprieve, like, yeah, sure. Why not? No, your brain.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And last one. What is your take on minivans?
I mean, you've seen my Twitter. I spent $30,000 or like $20,000 more on a Ford Expedition just to not drive a minivan. So I would say that describes my stance on minivans.
What about your What about your wife's take on minivans? She pro minivan?
Oh, she's a big no.
She's a
big no.
Okay.
I've like joked about it with her, and she looks at me. She's like, "Fuck no, we're never driving a minivan." I was like, "Thank you. This is why I married you."
Oh, she loves your internet posts, and she's a no on minivans. You really did marry your soulmate there. That was a great conversation with Alex Cohen. You can find him on Twitter @AnotherCohen. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show today, please subscribe, share, and leave me a review. It'll help other people find this podcast. Startup Dad is a Fishman AF production. I'm Adam Fishman. I have editing support from the great Tommy Heron. You can stay up to date on all my thoughts on growth, product, and parenting by subscribing to the Fishman AF newsletter at www.fishmanafnewsletter.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week.